It's April 27th, 2020, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count 'em up. Number 1, if you live in Georgia, please ignore your governor. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Facepalm 5 for this week, for this fortnight, I guess I should say. Let's get right to it. Continuing with our running theme of Republicans saying, to hell with it, let's just kill everybody. Republican governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, announced he would begin lifting his state's stay-at-home order this week. Hair salons, barber shops, and gyms were allowed to open on Friday. And today, restaurants and theaters were allowed to open. Now, I would caution those of you in Georgia who happen to be watching this not to run right out and go see a movie this week. But it isn't really necessary since, despite the lifted restriction, most movie theaters in Georgia are remaining closed. For one thing, there aren't any movies out at the moment because, there's a pandemic. And for another, major movie theater chains are saying it's virtually impossible for them to open back up at this point because, get this, it's not safe. Who would have possibly guessed? And Georgia's not the only state that is starting to lift coronavirus-related restrictions. Florida has already reopened beaches. Bill Lee, governor of Tennessee, says he will allow his state's stay-at-home order to expire at the end of the month, and that's in 3 days, by the way, which would allow most businesses in Tennessee to reopen. South Carolina is allowing certain businesses to reopen at a limited capacity and is also reopening beaches because, hey, people need to go back to work, right? They're tired of being cooped up. We've all been staying home for like 2 months. I'm sure the virus will understand and cut us some slack. We just need to get out, right? Yeah, sure. Now, most people in the United States, including mayors of cities and towns in states like Georgia, which are lifting restrictions, seem to get what a terrible idea this is. It's way too soon for things to be going back to normal, and telling businesses to open back up and people to return to work at this point is just going to create a lot more sick and dead people than there would have been otherwise. But that doesn't mean everybody is against the Governor Kemps of the country. In fact, there's a quite vocal group of people who have been screaming for weeks to open things back up. Some of them have even taken to the streets in protest, sort of, but they aren't all what they appear to be. Number 2, Astroturfed groups stage hypocritical quarantine protests. Over the past couple of weeks, protesters have gathered in state capitals across the United States to demand that stay-at-home orders and other coronavirus-related restrictions be lifted. These protesters carried signs with inspiring slogans that really speak to great lines of language in American history. I'm talking about stuff like, live free or die, give me liberty or give me death, and sacrifice the weak, which I believe is also the Republican Party motto, so no points for originality there. We had such a protest here in my own home state of Maryland last week, though it was pretty sparsely attended, and most of the protesters who did show up stayed in their cars, or at least wore protective equipment, almost as if they were admitting that the threat of COVID-19 is still very serious, even as they were in the act of demanding that restrictions be lifted because it's not that serious. That's right-wing logic, which isn't very logical, but apparently it's the only logic they've got. President Trump threw his support behind these protests, tweeting, "Liberate Minnesota and liberate Michigan and liberate Virginia and save your great Second Amendment. It is under siege." Apparently the Second Amendment is Virginia's. It's not in the United States Constitution. It's just a Virginia type of thing. Anyway, he tweets all of this in solidarity with the protesters. And I say, God, wow, what a great populist president Trump is. It's so cool that he's willing to amplify the voices of the common people who are spontaneously organizing at the grassroots level and carrying out these bold acts of civil disobedience completely independently of one another. Oh yeah, about that. No, they're not. It turns out several of the most high-profile protests that took place in states like Michigan and Wisconsin were actually organized and funded by right-wing political groups, including at least one extremist gun rights organization. According to the Washington Post, brothers Ben, Christopher, and Aaron Dorr of the group Minnesota Gun Rights have been creating Facebook groups with names like Wisconsinites Against Excessive Quarantine, Pennsylvanians Against Excessive Quarantine, and New Yorkers Against. You get the idea. And in total, these Facebook groups have around 200,000 followers. In Michigan, the protests in that state were funded and organized by groups like the Michigan Conservative Coalition and the Michigan Freedom Fund, both of which were founded by people with connections to powerful interests within the Republican Party. In addition to encouraging people to go outside, gather in groups, and risk their lives in defiance of sensible public health policies, some of these organizations are also using these protests as an opportunity to fundraise. And speaking of Republicans who care more about money than people's lives and are, quite frankly, sick and tired of pretending otherwise, number 3, in case you missed it, Vince McMahon is an evil bastard. World Wrestling Entertainment CEO Vince McMahon is a hack who convinced a great many people he's actually a genius. He built his company into a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse by sabotaging competitors, stealing other people's ideas and claiming that they were his, treating his employees like garbage, freely breaking the law and relying on his money and connections to keep him out of trouble, lying his ass off habitually for decades, and playing victim whenever things don't go his way. Does this remind you of someone else? The reason I'm mentioning this now is, as some of you have probably heard, WWE recently either fired or furloughed a large number of employees. I'm talking wrestlers and corporate staff, citing the need to cut back operations due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was one of the largest one-time talent and staff purges in the company's history. And hey, at first glance, maybe it might not seem that unusual. Lots of companies are having to cut back on expenses, scale back operations due to the uncertain future we're all facing thanks to COVID-19. The thing is, WWE isn't just any company. For a start, it's got hundreds of millions of dollars in guaranteed revenue thanks to a couple of lucrative TV deals, plus the income from its subscription service, which has been falling the last few years, but is still nothing to sneeze at. Plus, WWE has continued to produce new TV during the pandemic. Now, granted, these shows have been radically scaled down from the company's usual productions, mostly taped rather than live, performed on a closed set at the company's training facility in Florida rather than in an arena surrounded by thousands of fans. But still, it's not as if the company has closed up shop these last few months. TV ratings are down, but still respectable considering everything that's going on. And most importantly, the company is still on track to make record profits this year. Brandon Thurston of the website and podcast WrestleNomics analyzed WWE's financial situation and concluded that even if the company were to be unable to run live events for the rest of this year, it would still earn revenue totaling nearly $1 billion and finish with operating income totaling over $120 million in available cash and debt. $120 million. And besides that, according to its own press release, the company currently has $500 million in available cash and debt capacity. In other words, despite my stumbling over my own notes here, the company is in really, really great shape financially, even considering the pandemic and all of the costs and losses associated with COVID-19. So when Vince McMahon and his defenders try to argue that these cuts, which the company estimates will save around $4 million a month, were necessary because, hey, times are tough, sorry, I don't buy it. Their own financial reports contradict that narrative. And hell, the cuts to the wrestling talent by themselves, never mind all of the other savings that add up to that $4 million a month, just the wrestling talent cut, save around $700,000 a month. Vince McMahon's personal share of the company's quarterly stock dividend, which was announced week before last and is due to be paid out in June, is enough by itself to cover the cost of paying the fired wrestlers for the rest of the year. In other words, Vince McMahon basically had the choice of either taking his $3.5 million quarterly stock dividend this year or putting that money back into the company and keeping all these people on the roster. And he said, no, I want my $3.5 million instead of letting all these people keep their jobs. That's what Vince McMahon did. And by the way, no other North American wrestling company has made these kinds of cuts. In fact, none of the other major wrestling companies in this country, I'm talking All Elite Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, have made any cuts at all. Ring of Honor, the smallest of the bunch, even though it is owned by a big conglomerate, Sinclair Broadcasting, has continued to pay everyone their full wages while ceasing live event production and filling its TV shows with best of compilations. So, if smaller, less profitable wrestling companies are managing to weather this storm without making massive cuts to their rosters and production crew and office staff, why did WWE have to? It didn't. So why make the cuts at all? I refer you back to the title of the segment. Moving on to number 4, right-wing media scrambles to justify Trump's dangerous ignorance. Before we get to the Lord Dampnut segment proper, there is this one thing Trump said recently that got more attention than the rest of his usual bullshit. It's that weird bit from one of his press conferences last week where he suggested that ultraviolet light and disinfectants, if somehow introduced inside the body, could kill the coronavirus. So, first of all, I know a lot of us have been having fun with this, sort of giggling at the prospect of Trump supporters injecting themselves with bleach because their dear leader told them it's the cure or that it'll help or whatever. I just want to make clear that I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here on camera and say that I hope Trump supporters start drinking Lysol or injecting themselves with bleach or anything like that. What I am going to say is if you are a Trump supporter and you're about to drink Lysol or inject bleach, don't expect me to stop you. As I'm sure you'll agree, personal responsibility is very important, and it certainly isn't my place to prevent you from exercising your right to choose. Anyway, so that's what Trump said, and you can guess what happened next. People smart enough to know better than to ingest or inject household disinfectants, including the EPA, Trump's own Surgeon General, and the company that makes Lysol, all released public statements reminding everyone to not do the thing that we've been told not to do since we were kids, even though the president just suggested that it might help. Some people either didn't see those public statements or they just assumed that they were deep state propaganda or some such and tried the Trump treatment anyway. And I know this is true. I know people did this. People actually took him seriously and drank bleach or injected bleach or Lysol or whatever because New York City's Poison Control Center reported a major surge in reported cases of exposure to household chemicals in the day following Trump's press conference. In fact, they received twice the typical number of reports of people who were having issues because they had been exposed to household chemicals in the day. Actually, I think specifically in the 18 hours following Trump saying that at the press conference. And Trump's sycophants in the media immediately went into spin mode, insisting that we're all making too big of a deal about the president going on TV and suggesting that maybe sunlight and Lysol could cure the coronavirus. Really, the problem isn't that he said it. The problem is that we're all still talking about it. Come on, can we just move on, please? Conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt got all pissy about the Lysol statement when it reminded us not, to drink it or put it inside our bodies at all. And Hugh was so pissy about Lysol saying that he swore he'd never use their products again. The Daily Wire and Breitbart both tried to argue that Trump didn't actually say what he said, even though he was on TV when he said it and everyone saw him. And Trump-loving conspiracy theorist and radio and podcast host Bill Mitchell was like, we use disinfectants all the time anyway, alcohol, mouthwash. What is the big deal? You gargle with a lot of Lysol, do you, Bill? The icing on the cake is that a day after Trump suggested injecting disinfectants might help, and all his cheerleaders trampled each other to defend and justify what he said, Trump himself came out and was like, just kidding. He claims he was being sarcastic, which obviously he wasn't, but that's what he says. But that's okay, because the right-wing dipshits who were defending him the day before fell right in line and instantly changed whatever their argument had been to, yeah, obviously he was being sarcastic. Couldn't you tell? Because the president of the United States going on TV and sarcastically suggesting that injecting disinfectants might help during a deadly pandemic is fine, apparently. And now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. So he's putting his name on stimulus checks being sent out to Americans to help relieve some of the financial pain caused by the coronavirus shutdown. His signature will appear on the memo line of the checks, which are issued by the Internal Revenue Service. And for those of you who are not sure about this, this is unusual. It is, in fact, the first time a president's signature has ever appeared on checks issued by the IRS. The checks are usually signed only by a Treasury Department official because it's not the president's money. Why would he be signing the check? Trump himself is pretending not to know anything about it, although he did add when asked, quote, I don't imagine it's a big deal. I'm sure people will be happy to get a big, fat, beautiful check, and my name is on it. Has there ever been anyone in the history of the world as bad at false modesty as this asshole? I mean, people are saying I have an 8-inch penis and I'm the most agile and intuitive lover anyone's ever seen, but, whatever. I mean, I guess that's their opinion. I know lots of women are saying they never had orgasms with anyone else like the ones they had with me, which is nice, I guess. It's just not something I really think about. Sorry, 9 inches. I think I heard people are saying 9 inches, not 8. 9. Just wanted to set the record straight. I don't even care. His White House created a task force dedicated to reopening the economy, which includes 22 Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives and every Republican U.S. senator, except for Mitt Romney, who coincidentally was the only Republican to vote to convict Trump on an article of impeachment. People are trying to make a big deal about Mitt Romney being the only Republican left out of the coronavirus task force, but I mean, it wasn't my idea. I didn't even know about it. Have you talked to him? Is he mad? He announced he's suspending funding to the World Health Organization, accusing them of mishandling the coronavirus outbreak. That's a bit like Trump making fun of someone else's hair, but okay. The United States is the largest single donor to the WHO, which is the leading international organization currently dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. But on the other hand, Trump is up for re-election this year, and his base needs someone other than him to blame for the 55,000 coronavirus deaths in the United States and counting to date, and, needs must. He announced via tweet posted at 10 p.m. on a Monday that he would be issuing an executive order to suspend immigration to the United States. As often is the case with this sort of thing, no one else in his administration was expecting this or knew what to do or what they were supposed to say to all the reporters who started immediately asking them about it. 2 days later, Trump actually signed the order, which applies only to those seeking a green card, not to temporary workers. So, wait, if he's suspending immigration, and he's justifying it by saying we're facing the invisible enemy, which is what he says in his tweet. We're suspending immigration because of the coronavirus. We want to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Why is he only stopping some immigrants from coming in instead of just putting a stop to everyone? Oh, right. It has nothing to do with the virus. He's just a shitty racist whose supporters are also shitty racists, and he wanted to do something to let the shitty racists know that he's still on their side. How could I forget? It's nothing to do with the coronavirus. It's just his shitty racism. And finally, he declared he would not sign any bill that included financial assistance to the United States Postal Service unless the Postal Service quadrupled its prices for shipping packages. The post office, which typically takes no federal funding and operates solely on the revenue it generates on its own from selling its products and services, has seen its shipping volume decline precipitously during the pandemic. And the situation has gotten so dire that top officials at the post office fear that without an infusion of cash from Congress, they will run out of money by September. If the post office agrees to Trump's demand to quadruple their prices, any extra funding it gets from Congress might not even make much of a difference. Such a large price hike would make shipping through the post office more expensive than through either of its major competitors, UPS and FedEx. In fact, analysts cited by the Washington Post say if the post office raises its rates as high as Trump insists, UPS and FedEx will be able to raise their rates as well and still remain competitive. In other words, it wouldn't help anybody, least of all the customers, and certainly not the post office. It wouldn't be as simple as Trump's prognosis, which, quote, is they'll raise the price so that they become maybe even more profitable, but so they lose much less money, okay? In other words, Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. That usually goes without saying. So the United States Postal Service holds the responsibility to deliver the mail that is mandated by the United States Constitution. They have a job that they have been given to do that constitutionally they have to do. Trump is now saying that he will never let the post office fail, but he's also saying he won't allow it to get the funding it needs to survive unless it agrees to jack up its prices, which would only leave it in deeper trouble than it's already in. Oh, and don't forget that Trump opposes efforts to make it easier for people to vote by mail in the upcoming general election. I guess just in case those vote by mail initiatives succeed after all, killing the post office is Trump's plan B. Well, stay tuned, everybody, in a few seconds after the fade to black for the after party. But for now, that's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, and now more than ever, look after each other. Okay, hello. We're back for the after show. Thanks everybody for hanging around. Hey, Leto. The first person I see in the live chat is Leto Anor. Hey, how you doing? And I see a super chat from Keely Hartle. Donnie tried to look smart. Donnie failed bigly. Yes, Donnie did. Thank you for the super chat, Keely. So yeah, we're just gonna hang out for a little while. Let me make sure Captain Picard here is facing the camera more or less. There you go. It's important to look into the camera, Jean-Luc, when you're doing this. Stick with me, and I'll have you fit for TV in no time. So, what does everybody in the live chat want to talk about? We'll hang out for a little while, until either I get sick of it or you get sick of it. So, yeah, Michael Olson says, I especially liked Mitch McConnell suggesting states declare bankruptcy, which is in fact illegal. I mean, they're pathologically opposed to anybody getting money but them, right? The Republican members of Congress who are so dead set against spending money on anything, even to allow state governments to remain solvent during a crisis, right? They're totally against using federal money for that. But pretty much anything that has a direct benefit for them, they're all for. It's weird how that works, right? Yeah, allowing state, he says, I would be willing to, open up the bankruptcy system to the states, but I wouldn't be willing to bail them out. Like, yeah, okay. Good. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for all your help. Super chat from Aelmar. Donnie failed hugely. Huge. People have never seen such a failure. It's the biggest failure. It's tremendous. It's the biggest failure anybody's ever seen. I saw, actually, right before I went on the air, and I'm sure this had to sting a little bit. I saw Howard Stern officially endorsed Joe Biden. And not only did he officially endorse Biden, but he trashed Trump while he was doing it. Because I know Stern endorsed Hillary Clinton last time, so it's not like unheard of that he would, go against his former frequent guest and buddy Donald Trump. But Stern endorsed Joe Biden and basically said, I think the quote was, he gestured to a wall in his studio and he said, "You see that wall? I would vote for that wall before I'd vote for someone who told me to pour bleach in my mouth." And I thought, yeah, it's pretty good. It's a pretty solid reasoning there. Oh, some random geek. Would a Google Doc full of charity links work better than just me posting dozens of links? Yeah, let's try that. I mean, it might be easier on folks in the chat. It might be a lot easier for folks in the chat. Yes. And then there is the Google Doc a little bit further down. So yeah, that's, if you want to do that instead, that would be great. Yeah, Snakebit Cat, looks like Trump's followers really are sick of winning. Some of them apparently are sick of living if they're willing to inject disinfectants into their bodies in a vain attempt to treat the coronavirus. John Gingras has a super chat that says, we had an anti-stay-at-home protest here in Vermont at the Capitol building. There were more reporters than protesters. Was about 6 people. That sounds a lot like the one that we had here in Maryland. It was more than 6. It wasn't quite that low of a turnout, but it was written in a couple of different stories about it that there seemed to be far more reporters there to cover it than there were actual protesters. And in all the photos I've seen, and you have to be careful because photos aren't always necessarily accurately representative of what was going on, but a lot of the photos I've seen, it makes it look like there are quite a few more counter protesters than there were protesters. And the counter protesters should be home too. Like, the counter protesters shouldn't be out there either. But just the fact that there were more of them to try and make the protesters look like fools than there were the actual protesters speaks to, Leto Anor in a vain attempt. Yes, yeah, that's, and Sean McCauley caught it too. Yes, a vain attempt. I was completely unaware of that, but I will take full credit for it because I'm never gonna turn down a good pun. And really, all puns are good, really, if you think about it. Puns are really the highest, most sophisticated form of humor. Christy Abbey says, in Buffalo, we had an open-up protest. As far as I know, no one showed up. That's beautiful. Well, then was there like one person there? Or did they all, or was there like, did they all get together on Facebook and say, we're meeting in town square at, 10 a.m. and then nobody showed up? But because it was scheduled, technically the protest, it's like negative space. There's still something there. It's like the quantum vacuum. It's not completely free. It's not nothingness. There's something there. There was a protest in a sense, even though nobody actually attended and protested. It was still there. It was the negative space of a protest, which is something. Getting all quantum physics on you. Concerned Onlooker says, recently found you in your Trek Actually series. Thank you for this. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that, and I'm sure Captain Picard appreciates it too. PGW Chaos says, maybe we need to have a counter-protest to the counter-protest to tell them to stay home. Good idea. Good idea. I like that a lot. That's a great idea. Yeah, I am very pro-pun, some random geek. I'm very pro-pun. Oh, a super chat from Aaron O'Connell. A question occurred during the 5. If Trump was a Star Trek race or character, who would he be? I think the worst Ferengi isn't declaring bankruptcy against the rules of acquisition, and trans lives matter. Thank you for that last bit, especially trans lives do matter. I was going through Twitter earlier, and I saw Danielle Moscato getting into it with someone who was trying to fucking argue with her over whether or not it's okay to gently ask people or gently suggest to people that they put their pronouns in their bio. And this person was like trying to have this argument with her about it, and she was being very civil, very intelligent, and very calm and patient with the person, as she usually is with those kinds of things. And I just don't know how she can do it, because that's an instant block for me. If you make some completely reasonable, mild request, especially if it's on behalf of, increasing visibility for a downtrodden group or something like that, and people try to fucking start arguments with you and do the devil's advocate shit, but have you considered blah, 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 instant block. Fuck you. Yes, and anyway, thank you for the super chat, Aaron. And he would be the Ferengi that like none of the other Ferengi talk to anymore. You know what I mean? Trump would be like the Ferengi that even the other Ferengi are like, no, there has to be a line. Like there has to be, there has to be a point of no return that we will not behave that way. Got another super chat right after that from Jesse West Bateman, who says, what do you think the White House press briefings would be like if Dr. Bashir was in Fauci's role? That would be amazing, because if we say that Trump is sort of analogous to Dukat, and Bashir somehow were to find himself stuck in the Dukat administration, Bashir was one of the few characters on DS9 who made absolutely no attempt to hide his contempt for Dukat, especially in the early seasons. There's an episode in, I think, the second season called Cardassians, where Bashir and Garrick discover all of the Cardassian, the half Bajoran, half Cardassian war orphans that have been abandoned on Bajor, and Dukat is there for some reason. Dukat comes aboard the station to do something, and Bashir, there's a shot of Dukat in the infirmary, I think, like talking to Cisco about something, and Bashir is in the background of that shot, and he is just staring daggers at him, and just makes absolutely no attempt at all to hide how absolutely disgusted he is to even be in Dukat's presence. I don't know if that was scripted or if that's something that Alexander Siddig just took upon himself to add to that performance, but it is beautiful. So I would love to imagine Bashir doing that to Trump during those briefings, where Trump is up there at the lectern spewing off whatever bullshit he's spewing. And there's Bashir just sort of behind and to the right, just absolutely staring a hole in the back of his head. Just, you motherfucker. That would be beautiful. Some random geek says there are some trans folks that don't want their pronouns in their bio because it would be something that people could bully them with. Yeah, this was actually I completely understand that, and that's none of my business. If a trans person decides that they do or don't want their pronouns in their bio for any reason, that's not for me to tell them one way or the other. But Danielle was specifically encouraging. I should have made this clear when I mentioned it. Danielle was specifically encouraging cis people to put our pronouns and our bios as a way of normalizing it, as a way of getting people accustomed to seeing people, listing their pronouns. And this person was arguing, saying, oh, blah, 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 blah. And, Danielle was not making any kind of demand. She was not saying like, if you don't do this, you're an asshole or whatever. She was just making the suggestion, hey, why don't you do this? And I think she was specifically saying it to Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. She was saying, since you guys are supporters of LGBTQ people, and you want to have the support of LGBTQ people for your, to vote for you, why not put your pronouns in your bio, as a show of solidarity and to help normalize it. And this person who was arguing with her was like, well, what if they, and I just, oh, go away. Just go away. Pick a fight with someone else, because it's not, it's not me. Like, it's not me. But she is a lot more gracious and patient than I am. Yeah, 255 AD. Ducat is way, yeah. In a way, it's not fair to compare. Ducat is maybe the closest analog I can think of at the moment, and it's one that other people have made already. But yeah, there's no comparison. Ducat is just not only is he smarter and more capable than Trump, he's just a lot more interesting. Like, the thing about Trump that I still haven't gotten over is just how fucking dull he is. Like, if he was not in charge of literally everything, there would be no reason for. I never understood why he was famous in the first place. What a fucking dullard. There's not a single interesting thing about him. So yeah. Philip Holler, wouldn't the Ferengi laugh at all his bankruptcies? Yeah, probably. They certainly wouldn't have a great deal of respect for it, I don't think. I mean, the ability to earn profit is like the top of the, that's the greatest Ferengi virtue. Andrew Michael, I agree. Season 2 DS9 was awesome. I mentioned this and I did a live stream with Bree from Trek Central yesterday on the Trek Central YouTube channel. That if you didn't get a chance to watch it, you should go check that out. It's only about an hour, and it's just me and Bree, just being total Deep Space Nine nerds for an hour, and it was so much fun. And I mentioned that on that live stream as well. That a lot of people say, well, DS9 is the best show, but it doesn't really get good until season 3. And I just completely disagree with that. I thought Deep Space Nine season 1 and season 2 were fantastic. I went back and watched the whole series straight through again a couple years ago on Netflix, and I really, really, really like it from the very beginning. It's not that not every episode is great, and it does get better. Like later seasons, I do think it grows and builds, and it becomes a better show after those first couple seasons for sure. But by no means was it ever a bad show. Another super chat from Aaron O'Connell. Thank you. On tech Twitter, it's commonplace for bio pronouns. I organized a Python conference last year, and we had pronoun stickers for badges. Went over really well. Only had like 3 cis complaints about it. Well, that's good. Me and my wife went to an event. I think it was last year. It was like an LGBTQ event. Put on by a local activist organization that one of the officers in the organization is an old friend of my wife's, and we went. It was at a church in Shepherdstown, which is like the next town over, and they did that as well. They gave us name tags and asked everybody to write not only our names but also our pronouns on the tag, and it was really cool. And I don't think I didn't hear anybody complain about it. It was like, sure, absolutely, . 255 AD says, hang on. Douglas Sharon says, what is your state, Maryland, doing about COVID-19? Well, we've had a stay-at-home order for about a month now. We also have a mandatory order where if we go into a store or like a post office or something like that, we have to have a face covering. All non-essential businesses have been closed. Schools have been closed. And right now, there aren't any concrete plans to open everything back up. I have to say, even though Larry Hogan, our governor, is a Republican, and I would never, ever dream of voting for him, he has not done a very bad job of managing the crisis. He's done a pretty good job, and he's been level-headed and reasonable, and he has not been one of these assholes that's like going out in public every day and like chomping at the bit to open things back up. He's actually been very calm and very reasonable and saying like, no, we can't do this too early. We can't open things back up before it's safe. We just need to hang in there and wait for this, wait until we think that it's safe to start phasing things in and opening things back up. So he's done a pretty good job, I have to say. But yeah, we're doing those kinds of things and just sort of hunkering down and waiting it out, you know. Okay, now 255 AD says, question, do you think Eli Bosnick is a little elitist? The way he talks about Bernie or bust socialists seems super condescending. I can't comment to that because I haven't heard or seen what Eli has been saying. I haven't really been paying attention. So I have to plead ignorance on that. I don't know what he's been saying. I can't say. It's my fault, and I hope it doesn't hurt Eli's feelings if he ever sees this, but I haven't really been paying much attention to him lately. So that hole in his heart, that faint, impossible to define, like echo of an ache that he feels, I'm sure, constantly in his life over the past few months. It's because I haven't really been paying that much attention to his social media stuff as perhaps I should. And now, if he ever sees this, now he knows. I'm sorry, Eli. It's me. It's me. The emptiness that has haunted you all this time. It's me. And I'm sorry. Square Aquarium suggests maybe Trump is a really dumb Q. Oh, God help us. If Trump were a Q, he would be one of the Q that the John Delancey Q would have to come in and like fix everything. And he would be so annoyed. He'd be like, oh, God, why do we let this Q out of the continuum? He's the worst Q. Serrano Geek says, a cis woman asked openly if it's okay for cis folks to use they, them pronouns if they want. I spoke up as a non-binary person saying cis folks can use any pronouns they want. I think people should feel comfortable using whatever they think are the right pronouns for them. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Leto Enner says Macron wants to reopen schools on May 11th. That's one of the things about Maryland that I will say. I wish that I wish that our governor Larry Hogan had just canceled schools for the rest of the year. Technically, schools are still supposed to reopen here in Maryland on May 15th, which I think is ludicrous. I honestly don't think that's going to happen. I think between now and then they're just going to officially cancel it for the rest of the year because I don't think it's going to be safe by May 15th. I mean, that's just a little bit over 2 weeks away, and that's not, I just don't think that's going to happen. And plus, as someone else further down in the chat said, school is out. The originally scheduled last day of school here was going to be June 15th. So you reopen schools after they've been closed for 2 months. You reopen them in the middle of May, and then the kids come back to go to school for a month, and then they're back, and then they're out for the summer again. Like, yeah, I think they need to call it off for the rest of the year. For no other reason than just so people can have the peace of mind, and so they can know what to expect, so they don't have to plan for the kids to go back to school only for it to be canceled again. Like, just cancel it now. Just say no more school for the rest of the year. So, okay, are we saying Trump is a PAC-led? Trump needs things to make the economy go. I think the PAC-leds are too clever. I think because the PAC-leds are cunning, see? In Samaritan Snare, where they trick Geordie onto the ship, and it turns out that they're actually, they sort of played possum, and then once he was on the ship, they tried to force him to give them weapons and to make stuff for them. Like, they're clever. They're cunning. They're a little slow. They're a little credulous, maybe. Not the wittiest but they're very clever. They're deceptively clever, and there's nothing deceptively clever about Trump at all. There's nothing really truly deceptive about him even. I mean, he tries to be deceptive. I think he maybe fancies himself like a very deceptive person, but he never gets away with anything. Everybody can tell that he's full of shit every time he opens his mouth. He has no poker face at all. I bet he thinks he has like the best poker face ever because he thinks everything he does is the best ever, but he has no poker face at all. And he can't keep his shit together for 5 minutes, even when he's on TV. Like, so I think it's unfair to the Pakleds, just as it would be it would be unfair to the Ferengi to assign Trump to them. I think it would be unfair to the Pakleds because I think the Pakleds are a lot smarter and probably have a much richer and more interesting inner life as well than Donald Trump has. And Snakebit Cat says the Pakled's hair is way too nice. Yes, that's very true. That's very true. No, see, Neil Blumengarten. Trump. Yeah, Trump did trick people into voting for him. That's a good line, but I don't think he did. I think a lot of the people who voted for him knew exactly what they were getting, and that's exactly what they've gotten. They voted for him because he was an intolerant thug who promised to hurt people they didn't like, and that's what he has been trying to do and has done to an extent, unfortunately, since he's been president. So I think the diehard Trump supporters, I don't think they were tricked at all. I mean, I know people say it was economic anxiety. That's bullshit. That's not. I don't think the people who say that believe that. Not really. But it's a good line to say that he tricked people into voting for him. Yeah, Michael Olson, Trump says the quiet part loud, like Republicans couldn't win with mail-in. Yeah, exactly. And that's the main reason why I think the Republicans that are mad at him, I think that's the main reason they're mad at him. Not because they disagree with him, not because they oppose his policies, because he's letting the cat out of the bag. But they also have to be kind of comforted to discover that their base doesn't care. 255 AD, Eli said that most socialists have read 3 books from the 19th century and know nothing about poli-sci. That's why they think accelerationism works. I would not phrase it so dismissively. I mean, maybe it sounds elitist. Maybe it sounds dismissive. And I wouldn't want to say that that's true of all socialists or even of most socialists, because I don't think I have no way of knowing if that's true or not. But I do think there are socialists that I am aware of that I make it, whether they mean to or not, make it sound a lot easier than it probably would be, and seem to put a lot of faith in the result that I think is unwarranted. But I would not want to phrase it so dismissively as it sounds, if that is a fair representation of what Eli said. It sounds kind of dismissive. Super chat from John Gingers, Trump PAC-led. We collect things that make us go. Fauci will make us go. Yeah. I wish Jason was on this stream with me because he could do Plarb as, okay, Plarb. Plarb doing a Trump press conference. I mean, like, President Plarb, is there anything you'd like to say? Any words of comfort you'd like to offer the American people? No. It's my favorite Plarb bit, where you ask him a yes or no question that is obviously like a prompt for him to say something, and he just goes no. He's not. It's a perlocutionary act. Is that a perlocutionary act? That is it's what is implied by the statement, not the literal statement itself. But anyway, the Pakleds are only aware of locutionary acts. Aylmar super chat, thank you again, says maybe Donnie's an Ioshan, a piece of the action. Yeah. Hey, get us some of those heaters. Send us down some of these little heaters. What was that? Who was that? Vic Tayback, who was the guy who was like one of the main guys in that? I think it was Vic Tayback. Yeah. Call your ships. Tell them to send us down a bunch of these heaters. Yeah, President Plarb. It would be great. Soch says, poor Jeff. Yeah, Jeff. Jeff didn't. I don't. As I said when someone asked me about it before, I think Jeff is with the Angels now. Poor Jeff didn't make it. He's not gonna be seeing Marcy and the kids anytime soon. Yeah, it was Vic. Yeah, okay, it was Vic Tayback. Yes, Mel from Alice, absolutely. Yeah, and he was also in Vic Tayback was in one of my favorite episodes. I don't know if any of you have if you watched Tales from the Dark Side, that great cheesy like horror anthology show from the '80s that was produced by George Romero. Like a very very low rent Twilight Zone that is like so much fun. It's one of my favorite shows. My wife and I watched that show, and it's one of our favorite shows ever. And Vic Tayback was in an episode of that where he played this guy who had an alcohol problem, and he one day this kid walked into his office and started calling himself his son. He said, "It's me, Dad. It's your son, Jerry." And he just, eventually Vic Tayback is like, "I don't have a son named Jerry." And that's something that me and my wife say to each other all the time. It's just like it's one of our love languages. Quoting Vic Tayback from Tales from the Dark Side. "I don't have a son named Jerry." It's great. 255 AD says, Eli said one book. I think he was referring to the Communist Manifesto. He said something like they've read one 55-page book aimed at turnip farmers. Yeah, if that's, I mean, if Eli is going for, I think he's probably exaggerating a bit to get a laugh. He's using hyperbole to make his larger point. I don't know if he literally means they've all just read the Communist Manifesto and that's it, but there's clearly some comic exaggeration in that quote. But if I try to avoid commenting about stuff like that because I just don't know enough about it. Maybe Eli feels that he knows enough about it to be able to make that statement. Even though I am not a socialist in that sense, I am not a leftist or not that far left. I do think that's a little dismissive. I would not want to say that about people, especially people that I feel like I don't have enough knowledge about, to have that strong of an opinion. Press F for Jeff. Oh, the Miss Lourdes says, wouldn't it be nice if we could Brewster's millions this election? Vote none of the above, and neither candidate can ever run again. And 2 new candidates must be chosen. That there is an appeal to that, isn't there? Am I out of sync? Okay, let me drop out and come back in, and hopefully that will resync the audio. Thanks for letting me know. Be right back. Okay, let's try this. Am I synced back up audio visually? Hope so. That usually works. Yeah. So from what I know about it, from what little awareness I have about it, I am not an accelerationist either. I am not a fan of saying let's just let everything get as bad as it can possibly get, because then people will support overthrowing the government or support revolution. I think that's a really, really callous way of looking at things. And that's even assuming it would work the way you want it to work, which is not a guarantee, like at all. Good to know that I am synced back up. Sorry about that. It does that because every once in a while my computer freezes for a second, and then when it unfreezes, the audio and the visual are kind of, offset. And I've tried multiple things to try to prevent that, and I just can't figure out how to stop it. So I apologize for that. Stopping the stream and restarting it again seems to be the only thing that really works. So sorry about that. Oh, thanks, Doc number 27. You're not even looking at me anyway. You're all reading the chat, not even paying attention to the host. Yeah, ungrateful bastards. Yeah. Alam Drab says if accelerationism was going to work, it would have worked with George W. Bush. It's not as though things have never been bad before. It's not as though people have never had cause to rise up and overthrow a capitalist regime and install some kind of socialism. I'm not saying that it would never happen or that it will never happen in the United States, but I don't expect it to happen within my lifetime. 255 AD, I want to ask you, but how can Eli think that'll convince anyone? But that's basically my Friday question. Well, then I will wait until Friday to answer it. So, a Magnificent Octopus says Pac-Lids are more attractive than Trump. I mean, that's a subjective judgment, but it is one that I happen to wholeheartedly agree with. Spike Bolin, are you plugged directly into the Ethernet? Are you in Europe? Do you need an adapter? MST3K reference, MST3K the movie. Yeah, some random geek. There's no guarantee that things will get better under this current system. Yeah, you're right. There's no guarantee of anything. That's why we're kind of, no matter what your preferred form of government or preferred economic model is, there's no guarantee that anything will get any better. There may be a system we could switch to that if we work it the right way would result in a much, much better condition than we currently have, but there may not be. We don't know. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying that it means we should never try. But it also doesn't mean we shouldn't try to improve the system that we have right now. Some random geek says, how can we hold our elected officials responsible for their actions? Well, there are a bunch of different ways. The obvious way is if they are up for re-election, to vote against them, to vote for someone else, to call their offices and use the channels of communication you have to let them know of your displeasure with what they've done. If they hold public events or town hall meetings, show up, ask them questions, protest. Show up outside their office and protest in groups of people, get in their face. Don't resort to violence or anything, but, let them know that you are not happy with what they have done. And there are all kinds of ways you can hold them accountable. The vote is the most basic one, but we should do more than just that. The voting should be the minimum, not the one and only, Crunky says, hi, Steve. Thanks for all the awesome vids. Well, thank you very much. You're welcome. And thank you for saying that. Spike Bolin, do you think Trump's disinfectant comment was a crime? It was not a crime. I don't know if you could say it was a crime legally. I mean, maybe you could say he was inciting something dangerous, or maybe you could make that argument. Probably not legally. Was it a crime? But was it was it a crime against common sense? Was it a crime against decency? Was it a crime in some less formal sense than a legal one? Yeah, absolutely. Everything he says and does is a crime in some sense. So Random Geek says, at what point will Americans riot? Well, I mean, Americans have rioted about many things in the past. I mean, when will they riot about this, about Trump, or about economic injustice? I don't know. But I mean, clearly some Americans have already rioted about a whole plethora of things. Yeah, Sean McCauley, possible abuse of office. Yeah, but I mean, we crossed that river a long time ago. Robert Mills, tomorrow is my 42nd birthday. Well, happy birthday, Robert. Glad you could be here with us. Happy birthday. And my 40th birthday is, to make it all about me, is next week. Holy shit. Next week. I'm in the final week of my 30s. And I get to spend a tiny little portion of it with you. With all of you. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, God. What happened? Criminal negligence, Snakebit Cat. Yeah, perhaps. Maybe somebody could make a case. Yeah. Jacob Roswell says, it's amazing how Trump's fans keep trying to argue how to interpret Trump's words and not asking the real question. Why is he asking questions like that during a briefing and not beforehand? Exactly. That's the same thing I said during the proper Facepalm 5 segment about people saying, like, or even Trump himself is saying it. I was like, oh, I was just being sarcastic. I was just being sarcastic. Why are you being sarcastic? I don't believe that's true. I think he's just making an excuse after a bunch of people jumped on his ass about it, about how irresponsible and terrible it was to say that. Now he's saying, oh, come on, relax. I was obviously being sarcastic. Even if that's true, why are you being sarcastic during a press briefing that is nationally televised, where you're ostensibly supposed to be informing people about an ongoing public health crisis? Why are you being sarcastic about potential treatments for this disease that has killed 50,000 people in this country alone? Why are you doing that? Why is that okay? Why does that make it excusable? Like, yeah, it's people, they love to make that excuse. Oh, he's just musing. He's just asking questions. He's just throwing out suggestions. Why though? Why is that a responsible thing to do? Why doesn't he just shut the fuck up? Why doesn't he just not even be there? Let Dr. Fauci say what needs to be said. Let someone from, the Department of Health say what needs to be said. Let someone from the CDC or whatever. Like, let people who actually have experience and expertise conduct these press conferences. Trump does not even need to be there. Yeah. Yeah, later on, or because he's a ding-dong. That is exactly right. Because he's a ding-dong. All him drab because he's a psychopath. Yeah, that may be true. I don't know. 255 AD says, Bush was terrible, but the 90s economic boom continued for most of the time he was in office. People in the middle class may have had it shit, but most Americans weren't martially hurt. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. The economy didn't get really bad until the very end of the Bush economy. At least for most people, the economy did. For some people, it was bad all along. But for most people, and for the people that the media pays the most attention to, it didn't start to get really bad until right at the end of the Bush years. So that's a good point. Jamie Martin says, could we possibly commandeer Space Force and have a federation? Why can't we all be Terrans? That's a good way. Let's do it. Yeah, Crunky says, because a narcissist is the expert on everything. Yeah, and that is Trump. That is Trump. I mean, even when he is told to his face by someone who is an actual expert in the relevant subject that he is wrong, it's like it goes right through him. There's never an ounce of shame or embarrassment or recognition. He doesn't even seem to register. Like, if Dr. Fauci were to stand up and push him aside from the microphone and say, okay, this has to stop. Please, for the love of God, this has gone on long enough. Do not listen to anything this man says. He is endangering people's lives. He is a dipshit who knows nothing about nothing. Don't listen to his suggestions. Don't take his musings seriously. Please listen to medical professionals and public health officials. Don't pay any attention to what this gigantic, ignorant jackass says. Please, for the love of God, it will cost people's lives. Trump would just come right back and kind of do that little shrug smile thing that he does and go like, whatever, and it wouldn't, there would be nothing. There would be nothing. He has no capacity for learning, for self recognition, for self-awareness. There's just nothing there but pure raging ego and the absolute certainty that he is the best and he is right. Yeah, no capacity for self-reflection. Exactly. Yeah, Michael, he was shouting over experts. He is the expert. He is the expert. Absolutely. Some random geek says, will the 22 million Americans that just signed up for unemployment blame themselves instead of blaming our system? I hope not, because it's not their fault. I really don't. Hopefully they don't. They shouldn't. They shouldn't. I mean, most unemployed people shouldn't blame themselves. You're right. It's the fact that we have a system where in essentially you have to work or you die. That's the problem. I mean, the problem with unemployment is that it poses such a dire threat to the unemployed. That's the problem with unemployment, not that we need to get them back out there so they can, use their labor to generate profits for other people. The problem is if you do find yourself unemployed, that is potentially for a lot of people a life-threatening situation. That's the problem. And you shouldn't feel as though on top of everything else, losing your job and now having to face this, potential trauma, this potential crisis in your life to feel that it's your fault somehow. I mean, you didn't create the system that requires people to work in order to live, to basically earn the right to have a house and to have food. Like, you didn't create that system. That's not your fault. Is it? You didn't do that, did you? That wasn't you, was it? Yeah. So, and yes, I agree with the Ms. Lords. That's why we need a UBI. I am a huge supporter of basic income. Huge supporter. I think that would be a great thing. I think we would need to figure out a way to do it so that it didn't, so that everybody was taken care of, so that people didn't use universal basic income as, well, if we're going to fund this, then we have to cut funding to this and this and this. Like, we would need to do it in such a way that it wouldn't disadvantage certain people that actually need the money the most by cutting funding to other programs that they need. We would have to, figure out a balanced, fair way to do it. But I'm a massive supporter of universal basic income. Doc number 27, when in human history have you been able to not work and live? I don't know, but it doesn't make it right. Like, it doesn't mean it's the way the world ought to be, just because you can say, well, people have always had to work in order to live. Yeah, here Neil Blumgarten says, here in Florida, we know who it is. Rick Scott, who nerfed the unemployment system, and Ron DeSantis, who is in charge of it now. Yeah, it's often, it usually turns out to be Republicans who they sabotage the unemployment, they sabotage the welfare state in general, and then they run on how the welfare state doesn't work. After they sabotage, they've tried to do the same thing with the Affordable Care Act. They've tried to sabotage and hobble the Affordable Care Act as much as possible, and then turn around and argue that it needs to be repealed because it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, it's mostly because they have tried to kneecap it the entire time it's been in effect. So yeah, they do the same thing with all social programs. Oh, this is a good point. Square Aquarium says the royals have always managed to live without working. Robert Mill says most of human history, that work was done by slaves. Those are both really good points. There have always been some people who have been able to survive without working. Actually, I probably should have said that. I shouldn't have needed to be reminded of that. I said that in a Star Trek video. I think my Trekonomics video. I said that there have always been people. There are people today who don't have to work in order to survive, and they're called rich people. Somebody said, "Oh, fantastic!" It says, "Who produces the food if nobody works?" I never said nobody works. My proposal isn't nobody works. My proposal is people who don't work should not have to worry about not having a home or starving to death. I think those are two different things. I'm not saying, well, let's just make it so nobody works. yes, some people will have to work. People, you can't have a society where just nobody does anything ever. But we should have a system where if you are unable to work or if you lose your job or whatever, that you don't face absolute ruin. That it's not, oh shit, I don't have a job, I guess I'll die. Or I guess I'll lose my house. Or I won't be able to, pay my bills or whatever. That's what I'm proposing. That's what I would like to see. Not let's just have it so nobody works. Let's have it so people who don't work can still, have their basic needs met. How about that? Yeah, okay. I'm going to wrap this up. We've been going for let me see, well over an hour. So 255 AD. Who does X if nobody works? Robots. Yeah, get to work on these fucking robots. Can we please? Yeah. So I'm going to. Yeah, and Leto, you block whoever you want. That's why you're a mod. I trust you. I have complete faith in Leto's judgment as a moderator. So I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for watching. I want to remind you a couple credits here to do. First of all, I want to do patron shout outs because I forgot to do those until just now. Here are some shout outs for my newest patrons on my Patreon page. These are folks who have pledged $5 per month or more since the last show. Isaiah Taylor, who was with us in the Patreon hangout once again. Thank you, Isaiah. Chris Dunnigan. Thank you, Chris. Tash B. Thank you, Tash B. Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. Gottfried Wegmuller. Thank you, Gottfried. Your local Nebraskan. It's weird to hear that in Maryland, but thank you, local Nebraskan. The Loneliest Monk. Thank you, The Loneliest Monk. Gary. Thank you, Gary. David Cumming. Thank you, David. King Vemer 1285. Thank you, King Vemer, however that's pronounced. And Zach Cody. Thank you, Zach. Those are my newest patrons. If you want to support my work here on YouTube, you can go to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Steve Shives, and support this channel for any dollar amount per month, but $5 a month gets you a shout out, just like I did for those folks. And I also will give you a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video for $5 a month or more. And also, don't forget, in addition to the YouTube stuff, that I co-host a couple of podcasts along with the great Jason Harding at the Let Me Listen podcast family. You can listen at letmelistenpodcasts.com or go to SoundCloud or subscribe via RSS using your favorite podcast app. Links to all that are in the description. The shows I co-host along with Jason are Late Seating, the movie review podcast, and the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast. Check out the podcasts if you are of a mind to. And don't forget the charity links down below for all of our friends who need a little help. And if you can possibly afford to help any of them out, if you have a few extra bucks to spare, please consider helping out some of our friends. Or if you can't afford to help them out financially, maybe share some of the links on your social media and help spread the word to help some of our friends out who are in a time of need right now. Those are all in the description of the video as well. And also, don't forget the music that you heard at the beginning of the show, the theme music, as it were, to the Facepalm 5 is a little piece called Proto Funk by Kevin MacLeod, the patron saint of royalty-free music. What would YouTubers do without Kevin MacLeod? We wouldn't have as much cool music, that's for sure. All right, that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks to everybody in the live chat for being with me and hanging out during the after show. I'm glad you could make it. Please stay safe. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And I will be back on Friday for an all-new Ask Away live stream where I'll spend the whole time answering questions. So hopefully I'll see some of you then. And I'll be back in 2 weeks for another Facepalm 5. And who knows what the hell else I'll do in between now and then. Probably just a bunch of Star Trek videos and videos where I talk to stuffed animals. So I hope that's enough for you. It'll have to be enough for me. Anyway, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Take care, everybody.